In this video, I'm going to be redesigning 3 old pieces of design work from college, starting with this one. I started out this new direction by blocking out a large container for where my main hero image would go. I wanted to lean into the idea of growth and the plant-based imagery from the original design, so I found this cool time lapse of a blue morning glory flower. I think that's what it's called. I sized out the final form of the flower as the main hero image, and I thought it would be cool to kind of show the evolution in a bunch of little other images at the bottom. I expanded on the original piece of copy from just saying grow to leave room to grow. That way we had a little bit more to work with. I blocked out the containers where the different frames or the plant flower things would go and sized everything into a nice lockup. At first I started with that same Druck wide, but I didn't want to limit myself too much, so I decided to experiment with some other typefaces. The two I was deciding between were this weird kind of geometric sans serif and this nice sharp serif. I ended up going with the serif font because I felt like it was a little more dynamic and added some edge to the entire composition. The typeface is called a Magro, if you want to check it out. From there I used one of my favorite body copy fonts for small paragraphs at the bottom, IBM Plex Mono. Even when I'm doing personal work, I really like, having small body copy. I feel like it legitimizes the design a little bit, and it's kind of just a fun challenge to come up with little things to write, and I think it makes everything feel a lot more cohesive. For now, I just filled out the section with some random facts about, plants and flowers, and I think the date, and then I just duplicated that into different little columns as some placeholder text for now. At this point, I wasn't really feeling the flower approach. The image was kind of blurry and it really wasn't dynamic to begin with, so I ended up switching it out with this scan of a microscopic, I think, plant seed germination thing. I also applied a halftone to this, which, kind of grunged it up a little bit and added in some texture that we needed. For the rest of the small body copy at the bottom, I just added in some subtitles, random flower and plant facts, and the date to fill some space. And now I just needed to pop in my plant germination cycle images at the bottom to help kind of wrap this whole layout together. I popped each one into their corresponding boxes, and then I applied that same halftone effect, but just in black and white. I noticed they were kind of all looking the same though, so at this point I wanted some more separation, and I added some color back into the different layers for the main image up top. Now that the layout was finished, I just wanted to add some warmth and texture to the final design, so I printed it out on this thick cream paper. I've been liking this thicker cardstock style paper lately for printing and scanning back in because it's more durable and it gives a crisp print while still adding in that texture that you want with the scan. I also tried this Xerox style version on a colored paper that I printed with my laser printer, but it felt a bit too muddy and not crisp enough for kind of the approach I was going for. From there, I scanned the final print back in and did my usual color corrections. This usually entails, just adjusting the black and white point, the hue of the main hero image, and, adding some vibrance back into the final design. I also inverted it and liked the alternate version in black, so I decided to keep that one if I'm gonna post it on Instagram or whatever. So here's a look at the original version next to the new version. I really like how it turned out, and even though it's quite different direction from the original, I feel like it's a decent sized improvement. Now on to the next one. So I get what I was going for here, and I was trying to be edgy with the burning cop car, the all black layout, and the old English type treatment. I think the concept still has some value, but the execution was just so poor. It's very telling of what time we were in to see that plastic texture over top this poster layout. I think I'm gonna go a little bit different with the layout and have a cut up image in the middle and just, use some of the skills I have now to upgrade this entire design. I started by setting up the margins and adding a white border to this design. And I had this old typographic treatment from the Stutz little series that I did from that documentary. I thought it would be a perfect substitute for the old English. I used that same style, but I wrote out the new copy, grand scheme, and then gave it that added boldness by rounding out the edges and adding a stroke to the outside in Illustrator. I fixed the kerning a little bit and then brought my type back into Photoshop. Once in Photoshop, I made the type white with just a simple color overlay and started setting up my layout. The layout was going to be pretty simple and locked in, copy up top, copy at the bottom, and main collage image in the middle. I wanted the texture and grunge from the original design, but done a little bit more tastefully, just not a plastic texture thrown on top. So I use these distress brushes to add in some speckles with a layer mask on top of the main type. At first I dropped the cop car photo in to keep it consistent with the original design, and I wanted to split collage it, with some cooked bacon. It's a little bit on the nose, I know, but I thought the concept was funny enough. And I did some tests with layer mask and just cutting out the strips digitally before I did my physical hand cuts. And for some reason, it just wasn't very legible. So I decided to swap out the cop car picture for this vintage photo of a police officer. I feel like this portrait style was a lot more dynamic and showed both images a lot better. From here, I just printed out both images onto separate pieces of paper and headed over to my cutting mat. I printed the cop image in grayscale, but kept the color with the bacon to kind of give it some added contrast and separation. I also liked having the bacon spot color be kind of the only piece of color on the entire poster layout. For this collage, I'm basically just cutting the strips and then overlaying the entire frame on top of the other image. It's a super simple technique, but when done by hand, it just really achieves a cool effect. I framed the collage in the center of the poster, did some color corrections, and added in some last minute textures to both the type and the entire layout. At this point, I just wanted to reprint it one more time to flatten everything out. So I printed it on this grayish tinted paper, scanned it back in, and did some finishing touches. I know some of this printing and scanning can be a little bit redundant, but when it gets the very specific small textures or things that I want in the final design, it's well worth it. Here's a look at the final poster next to the older version. It keeps the same simple nature and bold message, but overall cleans up the layout and feels a lot more like a finished design. All right, here's the last one. So this old design is super angsty. I mean, the copy says everything sucks. Both of these last two designs, honestly, are very indicative of my mindset and vibe in 2018 as a college student. And unfortunately, I thought the liquify tool was really cool at this time. I used it too much, like way too much. I started compositing out some images just with like a simple collage style or digital collage, whatever you want to call it, and then applied the punk stamp action to it. This punk stamp action is nothing special. It's just a filter gallery with grain and stamp effects. I knew the design itself wasn't going to be all that, and I knew it was going to rely heavily on this kind of Xerox aesthetic that I wanted to apply to it. I used a few different elements to tie back to this everything sucks concept: the big skull, people at war, smokestacks polluting the air, and just this big landfill with a bunch of trash in it. Stuff that really resembles the everything sucks copy. From there, I used this typewritten font to really give it that look I was going for, and I arranged the type in kind of a scattered way to give this feeling of disconnectedness and disarray. Once the rough layout was finalized, I printed this design on transparent paper. When you print on transparent paper with the inkjet, it leaves it all smudgy and wet and gives this really interesting look. Once I scanned back in the wet smudgy version, I fixed the colors a bit, inverted it to give it that negative look and heavy on the blacks, and then printed it again on normal white paper. I wanted to grunge up the final design, so I folded it, used both this nail file and an old X-Acto blade to create some distressed textures and scratches. I also used this strong packing tape to rip off some of the ink and create some unique tears in the design. Once that was done, I just gathered some random CIA documents and just other shitty adjacent things from the world and created a simple Photoshop document and then printed that on the back side of our original design. That way, once I scanned it back in, it would give it this kind of ghosting effect on the image. Once I scanned the final version back in, all I really had to do was fix the contrast, darken up the blacks, and just finalize the cropping. I was pretty happy with how this one turned out. It's not the most, complicated or in-depth design I've ever done by any means, but I do think it's a big step up from the yellow checkerboard background with a skull and the liquify tool. Here's a final look at the new designs next to their older versions. At the very least, they're definitely a step up from some of my 2018 college designs. I really hope you enjoyed this one, and let me know in the comments if you want to see me redesign some more of my old work in the future. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Peace.